It is a big week coming up for European banks as EU leaders get together to try to hammer out tough new rules. And their success or failure could have serious implications for the world economy and the Canadian economy. Leaders are meeting Tuesday and Thursday to talk about the new rules known as Basel III to make banks less risky and force them to hold more capital. Many European banks were bailed out by taxpayers after the global financial meltdown of 2008. Even if a deal is reached next week, some say the rules may not kick in for another year. Dan Mitchell is a fiscal policy expert with the Cato Institute. He joins us now from Washington. Thank you very much, sir. First off, what happens in Europe doesn't necessarily stay there. How could the success or failure of the talks in Europe affect Canada?
Well, hopefully there won't be any effect because maybe nothing will happen. These Basel rules apply to countries regardless of whether or not you have some sort of European Union centralized banking regime or not. But then we have to ask ourselves, are these rules, the Basel rules, a good idea? Basel rules gave us the mortgage-backed securities. They said those were AAA. They said banks didn't have to hold a lot of capital against them. That turned out to be a mistake. Then the Basel rules said, oh, go ahead and hold sovereign debt. You don't have to hold capital against sovereign debt, or not very much of it. That turned out to be a mistake. So I'm not sure a bunch of international regulators getting together actually gives us good results. I'd much rather rely on a little bit of market discipline. And that's where you then get to the potential mistakes. If the Europeans get together and create a bailout regime, well, then you're just encouraging imprudent behavior on the part of banks because they know that taxpayers are waiting there to pick up the tab if things go wrong.
Now, what's at stake here? I mean, if they don't get this right, what happens?
Well, if they don't get it right, we'll have the same thing we had with the mortgage-backed securities getting ridiculously high ratings and the sovereign debt getting ridiculously high ratings. And, of course, a lot of what's really happening with all these discussions in Europe, it's really a behind-the-scenes fight about whether or not German taxpayers and Dutch taxpayers, the well-run countries, whether or not they will face exposure for bad banking practices in some of the Mediterranean countries like Italy and Spain, and I think sooner or later France is going to be in deep trouble as well.
Now, we're 4 years after the start of the recession. How come they still haven't put in place something that could guide them down a better path?
I think they don't want to recognize reality. If the Europeans way back when had said to Greece, you're bankrupt, tough luck, it's your country, you default, or you figure out how to make your system work well. But instead, they're doing one bailout after another. You have this so-called troika of the IMF, the European Commission, the European Central Bank. Now they're getting involved in Portugal and Spain and Ireland. You have all this cross-subsidization going on, and it's playing out in all sorts of areas, whether or not it's the European finance ministers getting together, whether it's the financial regulators getting together, like we'll see this week. If they just simply let countries sink or swim on their own, that would actually force the politicians in places like Greece to stop spending so much, which is what got them in trouble in the first place.
And these crucial meetings are happening at a time where you mentioned Italy, and Mario Monti, the prime minister there, has said, you know what, maybe I'm going to resign, or it seems like he's leading down that path. Wasn't he supposed to be a knight in shining armor on the fiscal front?
Well, he was basically imposed upon the Italian government by the European Commission, but it turns out he's just a technocrat who has done really nothing other than impose a lot of higher taxes, which is pretty much the same recipe that they tried in Greece. It didn't work. They tried it in Spain. It didn't work. Italy has had almost no growth for the entire 21st century. They're saddled with a very expensive welfare state. They have huge government debt as a share of GDP. Italy, just like Greece, just like a lot of these other countries, they need to either sink or swim. The politicians there need to make some responsible choices to scale back the burden of government spending. And so long as you have the possibility of putting your bills on German taxpayers and Dutch taxpayers and Finnish taxpayers, what incentive is there for politicians like Monti or others to make the choices that they need? You know, what Canada did in the 1990s, by restraining the growth of spending. That's what these countries in Europe need to be doing, but they're not because they think there's always another bailout on the horizon.
We'll see what decisions they make. Dan Mitchell from the Cato Institute, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.